All right, we're talking about staining pine again. I did a much longer video on this topic, but this is going to be a more concise overview of my step-by-step process. So let's start by looking at the wood. So we're going to use 3 different types of wood for this staining experiment / video. The first is just a 2x4. I know a lot of people get started in their woodworking journey building things out of 2x4s, so we're going to include that. Next, we have the number 2 grade pine, which these are called common boards if you're looking at Home Depot or Lowe's or your big box store. Look for common boards and you'll notice that they have a lot of knots in this type of pine. And the last is the most expensive version that they typically sell in the big box stores, which is select pine. And as you can see, this is typically doesn't have any knots in it, and it's considerably more expensive, and you can look for the words select pine for this type of wood. So we have 3 different types. Now, something important to note about staining is that there, as you can see in the video, there's kind of this shininess to the wood, and I find that select pine has the most of this kind of shininess that really needs to be sanded off to get a nice finish. And what I've learned is this is actually called milling glaze, which is kind of like the resins from the wood. They harden on the surface of the wood during the milling process, and when the wood is planed and processed in whatever way that they do to get it to this stage. All right, so that really needs to be sanded. So let's talk about the sanding process. We're going to use 3 different grits. We're starting with 80 grit, then we're going to 100 grit, and then we're going to finish off at 150 grit for this process. And I'm using my Festool sander, which is amazing. I really love it. So we're just going to sand through all of this wood, and you really want to take your time. As I mentioned, that shininess that is on the surface, you really need to sand past that to get a really nice finish. Now, this particular piece of wood, it has a little bit of a knot in it, and it has kind of like a void in the wood. So I'm filling it. This is my favorite wood filler. It's called Goodfilla, and it comes in a lot of different colors. So I'm just filling that in, and then go ahead and sand that down, and then continue with my sanding process. Here I'm putting some pencil marks on the wood, and this is on the select pine, which I find that really needs to be sanded extra. So you can put pencil mark on the wood, and that will help you know that you've really sanded enough of that layer off as you work through the different grits that you're using. Okay, so as you can see, the knot looks really nice after the sanding process. Now I'm using this little piece of sandpaper to just soften the edges on the wood, since they're very squared off when you purchase the wood. So I like to make them give them like a very subtle, slight softness. So I'm just using this piece of sandpaper kind of wrapped around a sanding block, and just softening the edges. I like to do it this way because, as you can see, the sandpaper rips really easily if it gets caught on the edges. So, you can just replace it once it kind of dulls out. Now, this is a really disgusting cloth. It looks disgusting, but it's called a Tack cloth, and it basically helps to wipe away all that extra dust to prepare our wood for, this is just the final stage to get it ready for staining. All right, now I'm gonna lay out all my wood. I use these little pieces of scrap wood with a nail in it to prop them up so that they can be stained, and then they can sit there to dry. So the staining process starts with pre-stain, and I like using the Minwax products. So we're going to start with a coat of pre-stain to all of our pieces of wood. And this one, I let the pre-stain sit on the wood for at least 15 minutes, but you can do up to 30 minutes per the direction on the can before you go in and put your coat of stain on top of it. So the pre-stain is really important with pine, especially because it's gonna just add an extra protection against getting that splotchy finish. Now for the stain, we are using Jacobean, which for 4 years I have been pronouncing this Jacobean, which is just hilarious and embarrassing. So I'm going in with the Jacobean stain, and this is a really deep brown. It looks extra dark on camera, but you'll see once we get the final product how nice it looks. So I go in with a pretty heavy hand. A lot of people had questions on my last video of how the colors turn out so rich, and I'm not shy with the stain, so I apply it very liberally. But you just have to make sure that it's not dripping and it's not like pooling up on the surface or anything like that, because you definitely wouldn't want like extra stain to be drying, just sitting on the surface. Now, this is the wood. I let this dry for actually 2 days because the darker stains, I find that they need a little bit more time to fully cure before they're ready to be top coated, but I would say at least 24 hours for more of the light to medium brown colors. This one I did 48 hours. Now I'm going in with a paper bag that's kind of been crumpled up, and I'm just doing that just to kind of smooth out the surface to get ready for my top coat. All right, so for the top coat, I use Minwax Polycrylic. I prefer the satin finish. Now with this one, it's extremely important that you stir it because it has a flattening agent in it, which will settle at the bottom. So if you don't properly stir it, you're not gonna get that nice satin finish. Now for the brush, use a very, very high quality brush. I like these brushes that I bought at the local hardware store. And then you just brush it on. It goes on very nicely. And I typically do 1 coat for just interior decor products, but if you're doing like furniture or something that you need a more durable finish, you would certainly want to do more than 1 coat. But as you can see, even when I'm just applying the top coat, how much the color and the grain is just like really coming alive. So I'm finishing up the top coat. It's looking great. The polycrylic dries pretty quickly. Within a couple of hours, it's definitely dry to the touch. So this is what it looks like. It's still wet here in this video. And now I've given it proper time to dry. And so I'm gonna go back in with a fresh paper bag and just, again, brush it down to get any like weird texture off of it, and it'll give it a nice smooth finish. And this is what the final stained product looks like. It's very beautiful.